To say that everybody is expecting a big event to occur right around the selection time, or as some people think it actually is, an election, which it's not, which has been proven, which is very clear. But we know that we've been programmed, and we've seen this programming for years now, where each side denies the outcome of the election. The mainstream media has been used to gaslight each side with strategic stories that they've put out there to make them think that the election is rigged, but not to realize that the elections themselves aren't even real. And Zero Hedge released an article this week about how the US military has been authorized to use lethal force on American soil. It's DoD Directive 5240.01. And the fact that this has just been authorized a few weeks before the fake election is going to occur tells us that they have some type of massive civil unrest planned. And I've always warned people on my channel, I don't really need to anymore warn anyone, because the majority of people who follow my channel do not believe in the left-right paradigm. They've pulled themselves out, or they were never suckered into it in the first place. But anybody out there who might stumble upon my channel, the government is baiting US citizens to get engaged in some of these events. The government is asking people to start showing up at these rallies. The government is baiting you into things like we just saw down with FEMA, where we have armed militias who are going after the government. Now, this is all supposed stuff, because a lot of these are psychological operations. They're not even real. But the government is changing the laws every day around us, and these laws are giving more authority to the government and the US military to use action against civilians. The state is armed with not just weapons, they're now armed with the legal means to suppress dissent, which means, of course, anybody out there who's conservative, we know that that's the way that they're going to play this, right? The conservatives would be the ones who are under attack from the US government. The conservatives are the ones who believe mainly in a lot of the conspiracy theories out there, which have already been proven true. The conservatives are the ones who see that the government has gone rogue. The problem, again, is that the conservatives have bought into the psychological operation that Donald Trump is the person who is going to remove the deep state. He's the person that they want, no matter what, so badly to make sure he doesn't win this fake election. And of course, they've created all these psyops, like fake assassination attempts on his life, where obviously if they wanted him dead, he would be long dead. Everybody out there who understands DARPA, who understands the military and the weaponry that they have, knows that they could kill him with a heart attack if they want to. Okay, he wouldn't be making it to these rallies. So the whole thing has been staged because it garners more support for Donald Trump. And they are building this civil war. Every single day we're getting closer and closer and closer to really the climax of this act, the climax of this story, right? The seeds have been planted, the psyops have been put in place, the civil unrest continues to grow. So the DoD Directive 5240.01, you can look up for yourself, is effective as of September 27th, 2024. And in a nutshell, what it does is it gives the US military the authority to kill Americans on US soil. That might sound a little bit over dramatic, but it's not. If you go through the actual document and you read what it says, you'll clearly hear that. Now, of course, it's very interesting that on DoD 5240.01, 3.3, which breaks down the subject to the paragraphs about the defense intelligence components and what they're able to provide and what type of assistance they can provide the federal government. Of course, very convenient that it's on page 3.3, or it's marked 3.3. But this is what it says, and make sure you listen all the way down. Subject to paragraph 3.1, defense intelligence components may provide personnel to assist a federal department or agency, including a federal law enforcement agency or a state or local law enforcement agency, when lives are in danger, in response to a request for such assistance in accordance with the following approval authorities. Section A, Secretary of Defense approval. The Secretary of Defense may approve any type of requested permissible assistance described in paragraph 3.2. Number two, the decision to approve requests for these types of permissible assistance described in paragraph 3.2 to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities are reserved to the Secretary of Defense. Broken down into A, provision of personnel to support response efforts for civil disturbances, which also require presidential authorization. So now you're talking about civil disturbances, right? The 6th day of January has obviously, they've repeated it over and over again. They talk about it every day. It's comical how often they bring it up as if it's the worst thing that's ever happened in America. But there's a reason for it. They know that it's not the worst thing that's ever happened in America because they're the ones who actually created it. But they want to get it ingrained in your head that when a bigger false flag event occurs, that this time the government will take force against the civilians. And then it goes down to say, Part B, DOD response to chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and high-yield explosive incidences. C, assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality or any situation in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. Such use of force must be in accordance with DODD 5210.56, potentially a further restricted base on the specifics of the requested support. And again, even on the 6th day of January, they tried to plant a lot of seeds that civilians were, people lost their lives that day because of civilians and civil unrest. Well, all civil unrest that's occurring right now is directly correlated with what the government's doing because they're using all sorts of CIA mind control experiments, which are no longer experiments, but operations on the masses. So they're the ones who have built this civil unrest. They're the ones who have built this civil division. This has all been done accordingly by design. This is really your government at work. And now, of course, when they create a big false flag event, because there will be one, they haven't done all of this so that there could be a peaceful transition of power once again after this fake election, okay? Because they've planted seeds for about 8 years now where each side has a boogeyman that they're going to blame if the result doesn't go their way. Democrats will blame Russia. Democrats will blame outside sources. Russia's their main boogeyman. Conservatives will blame the deep state and, of course, all of this stuff with the border, all of the things that happen at the border. So where they have this plan, what they actually plan on doing, I wouldn't be surprised if they plan some type of massive civil unrest at the actual White House. Outside of the White House, maybe barricading through. Because remember, over the years I've covered how they were putting up these massive fences too, security fences around the White House, and it's quietly just been like that for a while now. So it wouldn't surprise me to see those gates removed and to see some type of crazy psychological op happening on the White House grounds. Hey, we've seen predictive programming already over the years where we've seen government buildings and stuff like that blown up in a lot of these films. So there's definitely going to be something that goes on. We don't know specifically what day they have this plan, but what I believe will occur before all this stuff goes down is they're going to try to make it seem like this race is really, really tight and that nobody can figure out who's winning. And then maybe it's it looks like it's going to be Trump. It looks like it's going to be so-and-so. And then remember all the programming that was put in place with these specific states having debatable outcomes of did the votes count? Were they actually counted? Did they throw away the ballots? They're going to go down that road again. And it's going to be a massive, massive, massive psychological operation that occurs, which will likely lead to a massive false flag event. And then we will see potentially the government bring this authorized use of lethal force on American soil, which again could lead to something along the lines of martial law. Remember, martial law and these things, if they're put in place, the Democrats could technically stay in power. I mean, there are so many things that they could do, but we could tell that it's very close to happening. We've been waiting for it for years and years. The buildup has been there for years and years, and it's not a coincidence that this went effective as September 27th, 2024, right before the election, because they have something planned. They have something planned where they can legally take force on U.S. soil against civilians. And that doesn't specifically say that the civil unrest has to happen out in the streets somewhere. Who's to say where that could occur, right? There could be a group of people on property somewhere who all have the same ideologies, and the government decides that these people are a detriment or danger, or they were thinking about doing something online. They were talking. There was chatter. We called them in. The president oversaw it and gave authorization to the military. I mean, this is going down. And everybody out there probably doesn't think that something's going down because they're just thinking about, oh, I hope the outcome of the election goes the way that I want it to go, right? A lot of people out there just don't even realize how programmed they've been for a massive catastrophic event. The event on the 6th day of January was nothing. Nothing compared to whatever PSYOP they have planned. Now, the only thing we could hope, whatever this false flag event is that it's so poorly produced, like the majority of these government events that they produce are so poorly done. Like, I think that they even looked at the 6th day of January and, did that whole face palm to themselves and said, wow, that didn't really come across as extreme as we wanted it to. But all it takes is the TV to constantly tell everybody out there that it was extreme, that it was dangerous, that it was this, it was that. Then they start believing the lie, right? But we saw some of the most ridiculous stuff on that day. We saw people scaling buildings, which told us that these weren't regular civilians, right? These are all common sense things that we all saw that the majority of people never think about, right? You saw people on the side of the Capitol building climbing it as if they had training. I mean, could you scale a building? Last time I checked, I don't think I could scale a building. I don't know if you've learned how to scale buildings, but they knew how to scale buildings, which told us that they were black ops, which, was a telltale sign right from the get-go. And of course, the entire thing was just a charade that was set up for something bigger. And now we're starting to hear the whispers of things like this. The government's changing a lot of the laws. I think the stuff with FEMA ties into this as well. I think that stuff is out there too for a reason, right? All of a sudden, everybody's questioning FEMA. Nobody ever talked about FEMA. After this, people are starting to question FEMA, which they should. Because who's to say, why can't civilians help out other civilians after an event like that? Why does FEMA have to come in? The government has to come in and take control and not allow people into the areas to help other people. That's what the government's job is. So people have obviously become suspicious, but then they've put these stories out there about militia groups who want to go against FEMA. It's almost like the Democrats will be sided with the military state, and then the armed civilians are going to be left to fend for themselves. That's what they've at least built up. So we'll see where this goes. I just wanted to cover it. The U.S. military now authorized to kill Americans on U.S. soil. Not that they weren't already, not that they can't do whatever they want at this point and get away with it, but the fact that they, again, whenever we have documentation from the U.S. government and you could read exactly what they're saying, it's important to pay attention to it, right? That's why we talk about the patents with the weather modification, because people go, oh, wow, this is actually patented. This is actually documented. These are actually documents from the United States Air Force. Yes, they are. Well, same here. This is the DoD Directive 5240.01, which again is the DoD intelligence and intelligence-related related activities and defense intelligence component assistance to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities, which of course, in the event of civil unrest, right? In the event of civil unrest between civil law enforcement and civil individuals or groups, well, the military can and will get involved and can use force. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.
Up for an adventure?
Always.